I'll just open it up in prayer. Father, thank you for everybody here. Thank you for everybody who's going to watch these videos, and let it bless their lives, Father, and help them realize who they are, that they are all, everybody watching these videos is Israel, if they choose to be. In whose name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Amen. So this is parts 11 and 12 then for today regarding the building a consciousness, call it a series, essentially centered around Jeremiah 23. So I was going to do basically this overview of the scope of the chapter this week. Let me just get right into it. Oh, wait a minute. Let me just say something first. Over the weekend here, this is August 28th of 2022. Just the other day, apparently my wife keeps in contact with people through Facebook and Messenger, and the whole thing disappeared 100% completely. So all records of conversations and or information that people send back and forth, in fact, the entire Facebook page, which we've had for a dozen years or more, is gone, and everything on it. So just so people know, whether it's a big event or an individual event, if you want these recordings, they're being saved, I believe, on my website, erictology.net, but there's no telling how long or if these things can be retained, how long they'll be allowed, or so copy them or put them on some kind of hard drive or download them or something if you want them. There's probably close to 600 hours now on erictology.net of explaining these matters. And at least as far as Facebook, which other people were off that platform saying that for various reasons over the last couple of years, and now they have completely thrown us off, so we don't have any way to contact people or for my wife to keep in touch with whoever.
But it's still available on YouTube, right? We don't really.
They're still on YouTube, yeah. But what I'm saying is that was one venue that she would send them to people, and she was conversing with people about different matters. It's all gone. Plus, I in flying back from California to Oregon, I had was in such a scramble for time and attention that I left my phone, so I don't have it right now. So I can't even get in touch with people either on that, my home phone. But they're going to send it back. But just so you know, stuff happens, and if we don't communicate, it's not for lack of interest necessarily. Sometimes there's other things going on. And one more matter to mention is that according to some reckonings of the calendar, today is Yom Teruah. Anybody else have some shofars you want to jump in on it? And as I've encouraged people to do, if you don't have a shofar, you can always roll up a piece of paper or woohoo! The word teruah, tav, resh, vav, ayin, hey, happens to be the critical key word of Jeremiah 23. So that's really pertinent for having today be like this overview of the chapter. And in the Mishkan pattern, if Yom Teruah lines up with the menorah, pertinent graphics and visuals for the day. So if you're starting off in verse 1 of Jeremiah 23, the first word is spelled Hey Vav Yod. You could say, well, the Vav is pronounced as an O-U-Y, V or W. So you could say Havi, maybe that's the way to spell it or pronounce it, but that's where you get the word Oi, as in, the traditional Jewish saying, Oi vey, what does that even mean? But Oi is just like, come on, or something along those lines. But that's that first word of Jeremiah 23, Oi, Hey Vav Yod. And then the next word is Resh Ayin Yod Mem. Well, Yod Mem is plural, so there's the word Resh Ayin, the root of the word Teruah, as in Yom Teruah, which means make a noise or shout. But see, it's translated shepherds. And so if you look in Klein's dictionary, Resh Ayin also means friend and companion. And if you put the hey suffix on Resh Ayin, which is the feminine suffix, it means girlfriend or feminine companion. But it's also, Resh Ayin is the word for evil, wicked, mean, and nasty. It's to intend harm. So it's thoughts, noises, voices, and it means to lead or guide. So Roy, Resh Ayin Hey is also shepherds whose job it is to lead and guide. We might call them pastors or professors, or he talks about prophets in here, but that's basically a different spelling. That's Nevaim. But we could say there's a few words to start with the letter P. Priest, prophet, professor, pastor. They just all happen to start with that letter. And they're all those leaders that we look to tell us where the truth is, to tell us what's going on, to give us good guidance and counsel as to where's the pasture. Where's the pasture of Yahweh? Where can we find comfort and rest and serenity now? Playing off a Seinfeld show for people that have reference of that. Some people don't like it, but that's a whole idiomatic reference. The next word, Mem, Aleph, Bet, Dalet, Yod, Mem, Abadim. Mem is the prefix, the source, or it can mean the away from. So Mem as a prefix can be both. And just so you know, I'm not going to do this with the whole entire chapter, but I'm pulling in the first verse in detail. And then I'm going to go rather quickly through the entire chapter here to try to give you this overview. And then probably in the second hour, I found this really interesting thing that's in this chapter that I had never noticed before. And yet it's blatantly clear, but I had never noticed it until yesterday when I was going over this. And I thought it would be a great conclusion to this series of studying this chapter. So there was a song, it might have been Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Abaddon's Bolero. And then they pick it up and then it gets faster and faster. That's a bolero. But what's Abaddon? Somebody had done an animated film to it. And other people have probably done that. But I saw once a picture of a military tank with the word Abaddon written on it. And it's like, what is that? Supposed to be the devil, or is that hell? It comes from this Hebrew word, Aleph, Bet, Dalet, Abad. So, and I'm saying this because this is a study of the language, and there's a lot of Hebrew in English. There's a lot of Greek and Latin in English also. In other languages, we mentioned that English is this great melting pot, especially American English. But Bet, Dalet, Bad, when Adam was first created, made, fashioned, it said Adam was unlike any other. He was unique. So he was cut off and separated. And that is the word Bet, Dalet, bad. So, and it said it wasn't good that Adam was alone. So it's not good that he was bad. It wasn't Tov that he was Bada, that Dalet. you put the aleph in front, and you'd think that the aleph was I am alone, or I am. But Bet Dalet also means to, like, if you see a tree with a nice branch, you cut the branch off and you turn it into some other use. To separate this one particular branch from the tree for some other particular use that you have. That's Bet Dalet. Well, that's what Adam was compared to all the other animals. That's what Israel is compared to all the other nations. That's what the survivors of Israel being cast into the nations are compared to any other person. That's what somebody who attends to Yahuwah's word is compared to any other endeavor that any other person might ever choose to undertake on the face of the earth. But here, this word, Mem Aleph Bet Dalet, is translated as perished, suicide, lost, and destroyed, which is why that word was written on the side of the military tank. So to look at the word Bet Dalet, bad, well, doesn't mean bad. It means unique. So when Michael Jackson did that song, I'm bad, I'm so good that I'm bad, something like that. Their bad means good. Their bad is a good exclusivity. But when you say, I am cut off, Mem then is the place of or away from being. So the only way to really know what this word is not just to look it up in the dictionary or an interlinear, but to try to stare at it and let your mind work all around it. Because Aleph Bet, Mem, Aleph Bet, Dalet, Yod Mem being plural, but Aleph Bet, well, that's Ab, that's father, but it's also desire, it's a sprout. Dalet, Yod, means enough, stop. Mem is the place, so you could say the place where all my desires stop, you're perished, you're suicide. Or you could say Aleph Bet is the father, so this is the Dalet, the door to the father's place, if Mem is a place. You've lost the door to the father's house. It's like the prodigal son can't find his way home. All these matters play into the setup of verse 1, Jeremiah 23, and what the whole chapter is about. So the prodigal son story in the Gospels, in the New Testament, and then you got Jeremiah 31 talking about Ephraim, and he had become basically lost, dazed and confused. That word shows up a couple times in this chapter. Bewildered, disoriented, and all of a sudden his mind comes back on track and says, why did I go home to my father's house? Well, if you can't find your way to your father's house, then might be a nice thought, but how do you do it? How do you get there? And one reason why, especially in last week and this week, I'm invoking some of these stories we have from movies or plays or modern culture, is because last week I was saying, well, gee, if we mention certain things from ancient culture, whether it's Native American Indians or whether it's the Greeks and Romans with the Odyssey or Achilles, the story with the heel, or whether it's the Zohar. The word Zohar, by the way, means shining, like the movie Shining that Jack Nicholson was in. Which ones are okay to mention and which ones aren't? So if I mention I'm wasted and I can't find my way home, well, that's by the music group Traffic. And if I mention, Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Abaddon's Bolero, and I think it was them, and it's like, what? Why am I mentioning these things? Is because they're trigger references to realize we right now are at a summary of history where, all of history has happened up until now, and we've got these different milestone markers along the way that if I just mention one word, like, oh yeah, I know that whole concept, I'm wasted and I can't find my way home. Oh, that's the prodigal son. That's Ephraim. wasted his inheritance, squandered his resources, feeding pigs, and then the language. Hey, why don't I go home? Why did he think that? Because the word pig, he was feeding pigs, Het Zayin Yud Resh, Chazir, literally means one who returns. And some people might turn on the show and have not listened to any of the previous ones, and so they don't know that. So we'll do a little bit of an overview as we go through these things. But the idea that written into the scripture, Hebrew words that sound like English words, which invoke bigger thoughts. So we reference basically an idiom, cliche, and without even having to elaborate, it's like, oh, yeah, I know what that's about. So if I mention a song title or a movie, is that the same thing as elaborating or talking about the Shem, the name of other gods, other Elohim Achrim? Because Yahuwah said, do not even mention their names. It's like, you mean like, yeah, that's right. If I say the names of the days of the week, it'll be a mention of their name. So some people, and I'll say this, Thor's Day. Well, that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thor's Day. Is it named after Thor, the Viking deity? There we go. We mentioned his name. But the word name, Shem in Hebrew, means fame, renown, and reputation. So if I just mention the Thor, like Thur, because the O and the U, that's like the letter Vav and different phonetics, is that breaking the law? We tried to discuss that last week, and some people are a little bit more strict than others, and I'm not trying to say one's good or bad, but certain things are just out of line, intolerable. So to quote the Zohar, it's like, I don't even know what the Zohar is. I've never looked at it. And somebody put it up on the chat. Well, is that wrong? Is that illegal? And it's talking about the queen of demons. Well, now it's talking about the story and elaborating. And the word Shem doesn't just mean name. It means fame, renown, and reputation. The story, who you are, where you're at, your identity, your everything about you. That's the word Shem. And that's basically what was quoted by someone who put it up on the chat room. Or actually, it was in comments on the YouTube video channel. And it's like, why are we reading about this thing in the Zohar? And from what I know, the Zohar, which is what the Kabbalah is based on or referencing, is known as, its reputation is Jewish occult mysticism, which is to say the black arts, witchcraft and sorcery in a Jewish flavor. Is that good or bad? No, it just is what it is. So, as I said last week, we're going to talk about Yahuwah's stuff to the exclusion of that other stuff. So then why am I mentioning about songs and movies? As milestone markers to give us a reference as to what this is about. It's not like a bunch of ancient Bible stuff that we have no connection with. It's typical human stuff. Typical human stuff. And the only way out, remember like the Wizard of Oz movie, I mentioned that, and some people say, oh, the Wizard of Oz, that was about a wizard, and it was about this wicked witch of the West, and the other witch that was the good witch. It's like, what? Good, what? But the word Oz is Ayin Zion, which is the Hebrew word, which is why they called it the Emerald City, splendor and might and majesty. And there was a lot of things inside that film. Frank Baum, the guy who wrote the book, Baum, that sounds like a Jewish name. The guy must have been Hebrew. There's all kinds of Hebrew stuff in there. So if you can recognize Hebrew stuff in a story, what does that do for you? So if I recognize, hey, and it wasn't until I started learning Hebrew that I recognized that the word Oz, Ayin Zion, was a Hebrew word. And hey, that's the name of the Emerald City in the Wizard of Oz. Hey, how about that? Well, you know, they came from Kansas. Dorothy lived in Kansas, and her mother was Auntie M. M, that's Aleph Mem. Emma, Aleph Mem Hey means mother or handmaid, or like her aunt was her surrogate mother. That's Hebrew. It's all through there. But the point is, Kansas. So I think I mentioned this the other day, but a fellow from Kansas called up and we were talking, and I was thinking, Kansas, how would you spell that in Hebrew? Kaf Nun, that would be K-N, somic, because the vowels can come or go. So somic. Well, somic, sus, somic, vav, somic is where you get horse. Somic is a fluttering moth or a fluttering flag, a movement like this. That's somic. So a horse's legs running, if you have a video, or cars zipping around would be somic or sus, somic, vav, somic. Kaf nun, can. That's like the word, yes, I can. It means, yes, so truly thus. And then nun somic, those two letters in the middle, because kaf would be the prefix like or as, nun somic. Well, that's the logo of the Erectology concept, where you have the somic like the menorah, the apparatus, and the nun. So it's drawn in purple, and then the red nun on top of it, and the burst behind it. Nun somic, you look that up, and it's a miracle, a providential event, but it also means a way to escape. It's a sign, a symbol. And Yeshua said, if he be lifted up on this apparatus, like he, the living one, on the somic, the crucifix, well, that's Yeshua crucified as a picture of nun somic. The same way Moshe lifted up the serpent, or the serpentine copper shape, that's like the red nun, on the apparatus, the somic, the support structure, that those who were bit by the vipers could look and be healed. So these graphics are basically, you might even call them graphic idioms, thematic parallels of concepts embedded in scripture. That's one of the things I've tried to do with the various graphics that I've made. So to look at these stories and see English words, Hebrew words, connections, pictures. Frank Seekins did a book, Hebrew Word Pictures. Words are composed of pictures. That's kind of what this whole thing is. That's why I'm going on about this. So if nun somic is lift this up, they will look at it and live. And to look at it is hey bet tet. Hey bet tet. It means utterance and pronouncement, something that's pronounced, a voice that you're supposed to look at and stare at. That's what the Israelites were supposed to do. The ones that gotten bitten by vipers, they were supposed to look and stare at this nun somic, not just glance, but stare and aspect, utterance, pronouncing. What's that got to do with Moshe lifting this thing up? If you ponder what it has to do, you'll get more distance than what I have time to allow to elaborate on here and now. So what's nun somic? Because nun somic means that which is lifted up, which is very similar to nun sheen. NASA, nun sheen aleph, like NASA, the space agency, launches from Cape Canaveral in Florida, makes cargo vessels. They put stuff in, satellites or whatever, launch up into outer space, at least as the story goes, and plant them around the Earth to for the space station or satellites, or to spy or whatever they're doing, whether satellites. But they're in the business of lifting up, transporting, bringing back. That's NASA. Well, one of the key words in Jeremiah 23 is masa, mem shin aleph. So if you know the alphabetic letter sequence, the relationship between mem and nun is critical in understanding what those words mean. So mem is the place, the person, the object, something that is shin aleph. Yod shin aleph is the word to lift up and carry. Nun shin aleph is the act of launching or carrying NASA. And if you look at Yod Shin Aleph, you'll find it in Exodus 20, I think it's verse 7, where it says, do not lift up the name of Yahuwah unto vanity. And the word vanity is Shin Vav Aleph. So there's, as we've talked about the spelling of words, there's this relationship between a root 2-letter or perhaps 3-letter Hebrew, and then you drop yods and vavs as derivatives, add prefixes and suffixes. So you have to understand Shin Aleph and Shin Vav Aleph in order to understand Nun Shin Aleph and Mem Shin Aleph. And the last 10 chapters or so, which we're going to get to, 10 verses, excuse me, in Jeremiah 23, is critical knowing what Mem Shin Aleph means. That's why I'm going on about this. So there's a correlation also between the tet and the tav. They both sound like T, but they're two different letters. And you could say, that's redundant. Well, you could say that again. That's redundant. That's a joke, by the way. Anyway, why does Hebrew have two letters that sound like T, and then the Shin and the Samic, two letters that sound like S? And then you could even say B, both the Bet and the Vav can sound like the letter V. Kuf and Kaf both sound like the K or the Q sound, but there's a difference in how the letters are spelled. So even though it sounds like a T, if it's spelled with a tet or a tav, sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's different. We're going to bump into that with the word Natasha. Natasha. Well, when I hear the word Natasha, which is a woman's name from, let's say, Russia or Eastern Europe, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon where Boris and Natasha were evil villains. Probably Russian, because, you know, back in the 60s, America and Russia were or Soviet Union were at a Cold War. They were the evil bad guys, and so Boris and Natasha. Well, what does Natasha mean? There's a word, I'll see if I can find it and just tell you where it is, that it means destruction and ruin, to be destroyed, to be rooted out, ripped up. And the word nun tet, Natasha, nun tet shin, literally means I reject you. And that's a critical thing at the end of Jeremiah 23, where Yahweh says, anybody who ever says Mem Shin Aleph, Masa Yahweh, ever again, it's translated prophetic utterance or oracle or word of the Lord. If anybody says, what's the word of the Lord? Does anybody have a word of the Lord? Does anybody have a prophetic utterance? He says, if you guys ever say that word again, Masa, what's the prophetic utterance, the word from Yahweh, which I've heard in, you might call them charismatic or Pentecostal churches, that quite a few times, said the word is, I reject you. I'm going to rip you out and throw you away, and it'll never be forgotten. It's like the very end of Jeremiah 23. It's like, whoa, what's he so upset about? Doesn't he want people to hear his prophetic word? It goes all the way back to this verse 1 that we're getting through. Why, if you look at verse 40 of Jeremiah 23, is Yahuwah so upset that he's going to Natasha? Anybody who even asks the question, what's the prophetic word? When that seems to be all we're about these days, at least in my experience of the, you know, I was raised in the, let's call it the evangelical Presbyterian and Baptist, and then I was going to Foursquare and Vineyard and Calvary Chapel, and so non-denominational, but certainly I'd put him in the camp of Pentecostal and charismatic, and it was all about the word of the Lord. It was all about the prophetic utterance, signs and wonders. It was all about that. That was good. That was better than just evangelical. Or is it? I'm not criticizing, but we're just going to check the chapter here. So the next word, if he says, oi, the shepherds who lead and guide thoughts of destruction, suicide, abandon, and then mem pezadi yod mem. Well, mem pezadi, mafatz, literally pezadi is open mouth. So when Yeshua in Matthew 5 goes up to the Sermon on the Mount, it says he sat down and he opened his mouth. And I've mentioned before, what a strange thing to say. Is that the way people talked back there then? If I go hear somebody speak, it's like, okay, the guy came up front and said blah, blah, blah. I might say he said, but I don't say he opened his mouth. What do you mean he opened his mouth? That's a strange thing. And because it's strange, years ago, I took note of that, and I realized if you look in the dictionary for the alphabetic sequence natural order, Zadi follows Pei, 17th and 18th letters. Pezadi literally means open mouth. Explode, detonate. It's pronounced pizza. So pizza, you throw shrapnel of carved up veggies and meats all over the pastry. And that itself is a definition. Explode, detonate, open mouth. Mem Pezadi. Mem then can be the object that does that, or the one who does that, or the time of it doing that, or away from it. In other words, instead of saying, this is the time and place of my open mouth, this is away from my mouth opening. Away from my mouth opening. Well, if he's going to kick around shepherds of evil who are causing the people that would be his people to abandon, to suicide themselves, destroying themselves because they can't hear his open mouth, because whatever they're being taught is true is not true, it's away from pizza, his open mouth, then the way to read this sentence, the word mem is the object which explodes, so it can be a hammer. It can mean spread out all over, like the pizza, like a doormat, and it can also mean opening, the place of the open mouth. So is this the time of the open mouth, or is this away from the open? It's both. Or is it the tool and object of either one? Well, it's both of that. So now there's at least 4 ways that one could read this sentence and go back and plug in mem of aleph, bet, dalet, abaddon, and I know I'm adding the noon for abaddon because the noon is the suffix, which means the time or the place or the way it's happening. And it's like, wow, what do you do? Well, that's the point, is that the only way to get anything out of this study is to do this yourself, to take the time to sit and ponder. So I'm going to give you what I can in the limited amount of time I can. But the only way for you to take advantage of what I'm trying to elaborate and expose here is for you to sit and stare at these words, write them down in your own hand, stare at the spelling of words, stare at the letters used, comprehend, get it in your own mind and your own heart. What does each one of these letters represent? You can look at the orthography and get something out of it. You can know the dictionary meaning and get something out of it. You can look at the chart. You can listen to these different resources. But the only way for you to really get the opening of his words is for you to ponder it yourself. So the mem pezadi is not just open mouth, because a pay is anything that opens. If you want your eye to open, that could be mem pezadi. If you want your heart open, that could be mem pezadi. You want your understanding open, your wisdom to be freed with understanding, that could be mem pezadi, because mem is anything that, pay is anything that opens, and then the zadi is this flourishing sprout, a blossom. It could be this era of time, of Ephraim coming back to the words of Yahuwah and going, oh, please bring me back and I will come back. That's what Ephraim said in Jeremiah 31. And then Yahweh says, what? Is Ephraim such a delightful child or my favorite son that whenever I think of him, my heart grows fonder and fonder? Soon as Ephraim's heart changed, Yahuwah's attitude and world events changed. That's a picture of Mem Pezadi. But if you just think of it as the place of pizza, a pizza joint, mafatz, or detonate, or when my mouth opens, see, it's like you could see all these other things as you ponder. The next word, aleph tav, hyphenated with zadi aleph nun. Well, zadi aleph nun, well, those are sheep. It's ones that go out. But zadi aleph is excrement, filth, vomit. Is it sheep or is it excrement? It's something that goes out. It's to publish, to export, to conduct commerce, getting up and hopping in your truck and going out so you can do a job and then coming back and going out the next day. That's also zadi aleph. That's the way the pictures work in Hebrew. It's the action of the picture of something happening for Israel to be dispersed, cast out of the land, ejected. Gimel Lamed, go into exile. Okay, you're uncovered. They were living in cities. They were under the fig tree and grapevines. They were under a shelter of protection of Yahuwah's hand. And then he called in their enemies and said, get them out of here. So they were they were stripped, they were robbed, they were pillaged, they were dragged away. Well, that's the word Gimel Lamed. But to discover something, to pull it out from its hiding, to find buried treasure is also Gimel Lamed, a revolving door of something that goes around and around. Gimel and Lamed are these two shapes like this in the paleo. It's also Gimel Lamed. Well, which one is it? It's all of them. It's all of them. You got to get the concept. The next word here is Mem, Resh, Ayin, Yod, Tav, Yod. Ma, Raiti. Well, Ayin is I, Ayin, Yod, Nun, but this is a letter Ayin, Yod, Tav, Yod. So Tav, Yod is the suffix that means I have or I will. Ayin, Yod, Tav, well, that's the word ideas. Resh, Ayin, that's like the first beginning word that means thoughts or ideas or, noise or shepherds or evil or companion. So Mem is the place or the object of. So in the scripture translation here, it says, the pasture of my sheep, or I have pastured my sheep. So it's translating, it's choosing to translate the word Resh Ayin as shepherd or pasture, Mem being the place that I have shepherded my sheep. But if Ayin Yod Tav is ideas and Resh Ayin has to do with ideas and thoughts, then Mem means away from or the place of. So then I can go back and read this first verse is Oi, woe to the shepherds, pastors, priests, prophets, teachers who have encouraged my people to commit suicide, destroying the essence of my mouth, leading them away from the regard of the flowering of my words, and have led them astray as sheep, contrary to my ideas. Contrary, that's the Mem prefix of Resh Ayin. So woe to the Resh Ayin that is not my Resh Ayin. Bringing that sentence down to just a couple words. Well, that means there's people doing that. And as we said before, the word Resh Ayin is the word evil, simply translated evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 3 in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So, and we said this earlier in the series, I'll say it again. When Adam and Eve, as she's known, were in the garden, hey, don't eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Oh, okay, what's evil? They don't know. There is no knowledge of good and evil. What's good? Well, they didn't know that either. So there's a serpent talking to them. Where's the evil? The serpent says, hey, did Elohim really say you shouldn't eat of any tree? Oh, we can eat of any tree, just not that one. Is there any evil? There's no evil. They were unaware of evil until they ate from the tree that they were told not to eat from. And suddenly, well, where was the evil? They didn't see any evil. Suddenly they were ashamed of being naked. But where's the evil? Is it evil to be naked? Is it evil to be ashamed? Where's the evil that supposedly they were suddenly made aware of from eating of the fruit? Nothing bad has happened other than suddenly they felt distant or fallen from a mind that they had before. They were aware of something they weren't aware of before, but is that opened eyes? Is that opened heart? Is that to be more aware, or is that evil because it's less aware? Did their eyes close or did their eyes open? What's this knowledge of the tree of evil? Evil. Well, as we said, the only way to figure out what's going on is to look at the spelling of the words in Hebrew. Resh Ayin is translated evil, but Resh Ayin is friend and companion, like the Nachash, who had intended to sabotage them. See, he came across as a friendly animal, unlike any of the other animals, in that he was more Ayin Resh Vav Mem. He was more clever. He was more shrewd, more thinking. He could think better and communicate better than any other animal. That didn't make him evil. That made him a closer friend, like a pastor, a priest, a prophet, a professor. When you trust, to lead and guide you. Reshayan. So just this first verse compared to Genesis 3 sets us up to say we better be really skeptical of who we're listening to. Be skeptical of me. Go ahead. Be skeptical of people on the TV supposedly telling us what the news is, or scientists, or doctors, historians. The whole thing is, are the ideas away from Yahuwah's ideas, or are they his ideas? How do you know? Well, if Yahuwah says to Adam, don't eat of this tree, and a voice says, if you eat of the tree, he said you're going to die? No, you're not going to die. Oh, there's the contradictory right there. Well, then now that's the question. Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to listen to? Who are you going to continue to listen to if there's a blatant contradiction? Elohim said this, and this other voice says, no, not this, that. It's either this or that, and they're both are different, the separate opposite. That's critical for seeing what's going on in this chapter. That's why I'm elaborating this, is because, you know, we talked about there's people flying up into heaven, and there's people doing signs and wonders and all these prophetic things. Is it Yahweh or is it not? Is it Jesus? Is it Christian? Yes, certainly. But is it Yahuwah or is it not? And the only way to know is it Yahuwah, is it not, is to understand, to have the consciousness of Yahuwah, and how did he give that to his people? His language, his Torah. The instructions to regard a certain day, which includes certain Moedim, which includes Yom Teruah, and whether you take it as Yom Teruah being today, it's the first day of the 7th month according to the calendar, and the question is, when do you start the year? A bunch of other people are regarding Yom Teruah 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, and there might be others as well. At least there's those 3 calendars. So is it Yahweh's voice or is it not? So when an organized group has councils of great leaders and says, from now on, like for example in 325 AD, Council of Nicaea, they got together and said, okay, from now on, everything Yahuwah said to do in Leviticus 23 is illegal. And if you do it, you will be severely punished with theft of your possessions, torture, death of your family and yourself and your town and whoever else we can threaten you with. Well, is that Yahweh's words or not? But then a couple thousand years, it becomes the standard, the norm, that is Yahweh's people. Jehovah's people are the ones that are contrary to and stand firmly against all those ridiculous laws that he imposed upon people that couldn't do what he said back there in Leviticus 23. Well, who's the real people? Where's the real truth of who is Yahuwah then? It gets so scrambled that we can't look at history, we can't look at doctrine, we can't look at teachings, whether it's from the pulpit or from professors of academia or translators of the scripture, because how do we know if they're not intending evil, teaching us how to commit suicide? Verse 1. Okay, I'm going to go through pretty quickly the rest of this. Therefore, so says, that's verse 2. Actually, first he says, Nam Yahweh. I'm going to go into this a little bit more. The word Nun Aleph Mem, Nam Yahweh. There's a few words that mean to speak, to say, to utter. Nun Aleph Mem, if you look in the dictionary, it means utterance, revelation, declaration, speech, or document signed by. So there we made this one graphic of like a wax in empirical insignia. Like in the olden days, they'd have letters or envelopes, and they'd put a red wax and they'd stamp, and if it was broken, you know, it'd been broken into. But that was the official symbol of authority. The word Nun Aleph Mem also, to utter, to speak, to utter a prophecy, to deliver a speech, to address. Well, wait a minute. When he says Nam Yahweh, that is a divine prophecy. That is utterance from on high, like the Gettysburg Address. Why do they call it address? What is the address of Gettysburg Address? Well, it's Gettysburg. That's where it's located, right? So is the Gettysburg Address simply Gettysburg? In English, that word address means to address or to speak or to put out there, a declaration of sorts. So Nun Aleph Mem literally is Yahuwah speaking, signing it, and saying, this is what I hereby officially project as my voice. And you better count on this being the real thing. Well, isn't that a synonym with Masa? Masa Yahweh? Yeah, yes, it is. I'm going to show you a few synonyms. If Nam Yahweh is utterance, revelation, declaration, document signed by, all through this chapter, he says Nam Yahweh. As a matter of fact, he says it, I believe it's 18 times. 17 times. 17 times. Well, the letter 17, the 17th letter is a pay, which is a mouth or something which opens. It's like, so there's an encrypted way of saying, you want my mouth? Here's my mouth. So this is Jeremiah 23. It's really almost, you might call it a mystical concept embedded in here, because peppered through scripture, you'll find this Nam Yahweh. 17 times out of 40 verses, he says Nam Yahweh. And 5 more times, he says, so declares Yahweh. Well, that's a synonym. Nun Aleph Mem, utterance, revelation, declaration, speech. Nun Aleph Hey, because the mem could be a suffix, and nun the prefix of that which does the Aleph Mem. Aleph Mem is the word mother, Emma, the womb. Nun Aleph Hey, Hey is a suffix, nun is the prefix. So the Aleph is the essence. It means to be comely, befitting, decorated, beautified. He adorned himself, took pleasure in, dwelling, habitation, pasture, meadow. Well, that's like the Garden of Eden. So Leviticus 23 talks about the Moedi, the Mem Ayin Dalet Yod, as Edi Ayin Dalet Yod means he adorned himself, bejeweled, ornamented. But here, Nun Aleph Hey is as a synonym, meaning he adorned himself. So the Mem, those items by which he testified, Ayin Dalet also means testify, testimony and witness. He testified of his mind, his heart, his grandeur, his identity, his Shem, where he's at, by these Moedim. And so to obliterate the Moedim means you got a different identity. It's no longer Yahuwah Zavot, the Elohim of Israel. It's some other trumped up fake identity. It's also the dwelling habitation. Well, that's like the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden. Well, the word Gimel Nun, Gan, is not just garden, but it's that which is guarded. So we could say that the Moedim, which includes Shabbat of Leviticus 23, are those things which Yahuwah guards, and if his people keep them, identifying themselves as his people, he's sworn by vow to guard them. So the Gan Eden is not just a location, but it's actually a promise to be the Elohim, to be the defender and the champion of offense against the enemies of those who harbor within Eden, which is the place where he has declared that he has adorned himself. So if you took Nun Aleph Mem and you put a Nun suffix at the end, so it's Nun Aleph Mem Nun. Aleph Mem Nun is the word that we hear as Amen, which in English simply means so be it. But Nun Aleph Mem Nun in the dictionary means steadfast, firm, sure, faithful, trustworthy, reliable. So if there's any question as to what the truth is, or what we're looking for, or what is it that is of Yahuwah or not, it's the Nun Aleph Mem Nun, which is absolutely, he gave it to us in this language that we could trust without fail, without apprehension, that this is the is. This stuff right here in this language, whenever he stamps Nam Yahweh, absolutely put all your confidence right here. Aleph Mem, mother, metropolis, womb, if, whether, on condition. It's also nation or people. Aleph, mem, hey, Emma, maidservant, doorposts. The doorposts. Write these words on the doorposts. Otherwise, mezuzah, it's a suffix, a synonym. If you look at Aleph, mem, noon, so this is instead of noon, Aleph, mem, we're looking at Aleph, mem, noon, because it's just taking putting the suffix noon, taking away the prefix noon. It means it's a synonym. Firm, this is the word amen. Firm, true, trustworthy, trained, educated, believed, trusted, confirmed, accredited, certainly. Fidelity, artist, master, workman, specialist, craftsman, pilaster, column, post, education. It's all the solid stuff. So when we talked the word last week, Ahmad Basodi, which we'll find in here, verse it's either 18 or 35, 18 I think it was. He picture the Parthenon, you know, this Greek building with column after column after column, these majestic tons of stone that they've got perfectly carved and set in order. That's a picture of Ahmad. And the foundation they're on is the basod. What is it that holds up everything? And I can look at the meanings of the Hebrew alphabet, keyed to Yahuwah's identity as the Ahmad Basodi. But it's family secrets. It's not something that you'll see unless you ponder and realize it. Amer is a synonym, Aleph Mem Resh, which is translated to speak or say, but it means high, take off, in flight. Aleph Mem Resh, Aleph Hey also means a revolt, which is words against the king. Yeah, you think so? Okay, well, that's what a revolution is. Aleph Mem Resh, to say, command, or order, word, speech, saying, utterance. But Aleph Mem Resh, Hey, add the hey suffix, and it's him, hem. The bottom of your garment, fringe. You know, mountain men, cowboys, they'd have fringes hanging off their leather jacket. Motorcycle riders have fringes. Why? A friend of mine's a biker, and he said, well, it catches your attention. If a biker's riding next to you on the road and the fringe catches your eye, it's like, oh, be careful, don't swerve and hit that guy. So this same idea of Aleph Mem Resh, hey, selvage, statement, fringe. Why do we have zitziot? Oh, he said zitziot. That's why it's called a zitzi fly, because it flies. So it's something that catches your attention at the hem of your garment, but it's a synonym with the word statement. He says, you will look at that and remember, what did I say? So the idea for wearing zitziot is not just as some fancy attire. It's because he commanded. Now, if you know Hebrew, there's three different words. One's mem, lamed, lamed, that means hem or selvage or fringe, or to capture attention by what was said, very specifically. Go on here. Emet, Aleph Mem, with a tav suffix means, that's where we get the word truth. Verify, weights and measures. Confirm, authenticate, prove true. Truth, axiom, genuine veracity. And I already mentioned the word hey, bet, tet, aspect, look at, an utterance, and pronouncing. And the word hey, gimel, hey, navigate. Pronounce words phonetically. Embedded within the Hebrew is that if you look at what he said, to hear what he said, by the spelling of words, the phonetic pronouncement. He gave us two ways: hearing, balancing, and seeing, weighing, measuring, which is also a type of balancing every word he said. And this entire chapter is about, what's the Masa Yahweh? What did he say? And if you don't address what he said, this is the prophetic utterance. I'm going to reject you, and you're going to get ripped apart by your enemies. Now, the other word that means what did he say was mem, lamed, lamed. Mem, lamed, lamed means speak, say, utter, rub, scrape, move to and fro, border, hem, fringe. So if you have a long robe and it's rubbing on the ground and it gets kind of frayed and ripped up, that's mem, lamed, lamed, which is just like the zitzi fringes. Mem, lamed, lamed, yod means somebody. Somebody. Something about the fringes or the fray at the hem of a robe. And all of a sudden I remember there's a story in Mark chapter 5 of the New Testament Gospels and Luke chapter 8. Mark 5:25 and Luke 8:43, where Yeshua's walking in a heavy crowd, people jostling, and all of a sudden he says, somebody touched me. The word somebody is mem lamed lamed yod. Mem lamed lamed is speak, say, or utter. Mem lamed lamed yod then means I have spoken. I speak my words. Mem lamed lamed yod also means withered or decayed, or I'm withered. Well, who touched him? The lady that was so withered and decayed, 5 minutes, the lady that was so withered and decayed because she has put up with 12 years of a blood condition that no doctor could help her. And she was at her wit's end, you might say. She was completely, I'm done. Well, the word mem lamed aleph means, and again, the benefit of looking at the dictionary is you look at one word, and then you look at the derivatives words, you double the second letter and make it the second and the third, you put yods and vavs in between, other prefixes and suffixes. This whole nature of study, mem lamed zadi, which is a different third letter, means smooth, pleasant, to recommend, to translate, interpreter, which is exactly what we're doing here. Eloquent speech, to take mem lamed, which has the root of saying, what did Yahweh say, and interpret it or put it into an aspect that you can appreciate, is mem lamed zadi, because the zadi is a flower, a flourish. The resurrection of the pay of his mouth is Yeshua coming out of the grave. So mem lamed aleph, full, fill, complete, confirm, accomplish, plenty. Why did that lady think that if she touched the hem of his garment or the zitziot on his garment, either way, that she would be healed? Because mem lamed vav lamed is speech. Mem lamed vav lamed yod means verbal, literal, or lexical, where we get the word lexicon. Mem lamed vav nun is a lodging place in dictionary lexicography. I'm just giving you the derivatives. But he was this teacher. The word teacher, to teach, is lamed, lamed mem dalet. And because he's the teacher, that makes him a mem lamed mem dalet. That word in the dictionary means measure, meter, garment. And because this all has to do with lexicography, literal, verbal, it's a garment of words. Trained, skilled teacher. Mem dalet is where we get the concept of tailor-made or mode. Mem dalet. Index, attribute, character, nature, rule, principle. Mem lamed is speech. So here's a mem dalet, a garment of words. Yeshua was known as the teacher of the words, but he himself, his flesh, was a garment of the words of Yahuwah. The utterance of a prophet, mem shin aleph, mush. Mem shin aleph, uprising smoke. Mem shin hey, to draw out. Mem vav shin, mush, to feel or touch. He thought, if I reach out and touch, if I mush his garment, based on what he said, shin yod chet, shiach, to speak, talk, converse, musing, meditation, similar to Hagah. The picture of this lady being depleted, dalet vav hey, that if she touched his garment, mem dalet, she would be made complete, mem lamed, because he speaks, mem lamed lamed. And the fringe, mem lamed lamed. What I'm saying is that the entire story in this gospel of the woman with the issue of blood for 12 years, if you look at it in Hebrew, it's a message. She must have been contemplating each one of these Hebrew words in order to put it all together and say, all I need to do is touch the hem of his garment. Reach out and touch it, and I'll be healed. Reach out and mush Shiach, because he's Mashiach. How do you know he's the Messiah? What does that mean? It's embedded in this story. He's the garment of words. Just real quick, and then we'll take a break. The other interesting thing Shin Yod Het, Shiach, is to speak, talk, converse. Shin Yod Tet is rowing, an oar, swimmer. It's a line of thought, theory, principle, doctrine, method, or system, like building a consciousness with lines and theoretical construct of build this principle upon that one, and upon that one, like the columns in the Parthenon, like the letters built upon each other. Shin Yod Tet Nun, put the nun suffix vav tav, means methodicalness or systematic. Nothing wrong with that. But Shin Tet Nun is satanic. Acute hate, adversarial. Shin Tet Hey, madness, derided, laughed at, made a fool of, mocked, derided, sneered at, deviate, apostate, go astray, rover, rambler, turn aside, swerve, wander, wonder, winder, wounded, where we get all these words. What I'm saying is, you take methodical, let me just finish this sentence. You take the methodical system of understanding what Yahweh said and you tweak it, that's satanic. That's what he did. He countered what Yahweh said. The whole point is we got to figure out, what did Yahweh say? It's the only way to stay on track. Okay, time to take a break.